Good morning, fellow students and teachers. I'm Gabriella West with the Victor Voice. Hopefully you aren't seeing us on Friday and that we got a snow day. Before we air Mr. Siesto's response as a part 2 to our piece on student representation, we wanted to acknowledge that there have been strong reactions to part 1. We here at the Victor Voice Morning Show are glad that these conversations in classrooms are taking place and hope that students felt heard while talking about the ideas from last episode. We also wanted to let you know that the administration reached out to us after last episode. Mr. Siesto told us he hopes every student has someone that they can talk to, and that the issues in the school, from student voice to the bathrooms to student behavior, are important and worth discussing. As a result of part 1 and the school's response, he offered to sit down for an additional video, and hopefully to air in the coming weeks, in which he talks with students covering the topics discussed and other pressing school issues. Thank you, and here is part 2 to our series on student voice and representation.
Hi Victor Senior High, I'm Allie Cook.
And I'm Gabriella West, and we're back with the Victor Voice.
Today we are continuing our story on student representation.
Last episode, we heard from multiple students that felt their voices were not heard.
Let's see what Mr. Siesto has to say about student voices.
So my first question for you is, at Victor, student voices are blank.
I think student voices are valued now more than ever. I think student voice helps guide and shape what we do as a district.
And what's an example of when student voices were or were not represented?
We're trying to improve our diversity, equity, and inclusion, so we're bringing student voice into that. There were times where student voice maybe was not heard as much. Some of the instructional shifts that we had to make last year during COVID, those were made mostly by the adult educators. We found out about a year ago, we met with a group of students where some of the changes that we had made were not working. It's important to make sure that you have student voice whenever you make a huge sweeping change in decisions. Sometimes decisions have to be made that you have to just start with something. But for the most part, we try to make sure that we're collaborative and explain the reasoning behind our decision making.
So we asked the same questions to students and teachers, and many students said something to the effect of that their voices were not heard, and many students did bring up the petition that happened about online learning. Mm-hmm. What do you have to respond to that with?
You know, that was a tough situation. I understand the frustration with that. The tough situation is that we were trying to provide students with a quality education, and at the time, if you chose to come to school, you were still only coming to school 2 out of 5 days a week. We didn't want to see students falling behind academically. I think largely that did happen last year for no fault other than it was COVID.
A lot of students think that when there are conflicts that problems go unresolved or ignored. Do you think that problems or conflicts that do happen are properly addressed, or there are some issues?
I think we do the best that we can. There's quite a bit that we have to make sure that we preserve when it comes to confidentiality. In a school setting, we have to make sure that we're respecting everybody's rights, but also their privacy, and what can and cannot be sometimes explained. We understand what the normal line of thinking is with that in terms of wanting to know information, but there are certain times where we just can't share information.
What do you think that the school could do to better represent their students?
You know, if there are students out there who feel like, I've got a voice, I've got something to say, there's avenues that we have for that to happen, whether it's through student council or through a club or activity or shared decision-making group. We always value student voice. It's tough to sometimes get student voice if students are reluctant to share. However, if there's ways that we can do better, then we certainly absolutely want to know. So mistakes are going to happen, but we want to correct those, make sure that they don't happen in the future, and we never do it maliciously. We want to make sure that we're including our students.
Thank you for sharing your opinions.
Absolutely.
After speaking with students, teachers, and Mr. Siesto, we're left with a few questions.
Are student voices actually heard on teams and committees, or are they just there to fill a required spot?
Are student ideas only addressed when they're supporting a change that teachers also want to make?
Do the systems made to help the students actually work?
If there is student agreement on an issue, why do we rarely see change being made?
The major takeaway from all our interviews is that we need to speak up, even if, or maybe because, we are sometimes ignored.
If there's an issue, we shouldn't just move on. We should speak up on it.